On today's episode of Impact Sust, I had the pleasure of speaking with Kathrine Tinggaard Nicholsain, the visionary founder of Olives and Heather, a dynamic branding, marketing and PR agency based in Ramallah, Palestine. Kathrine's inspiring career journey is testament to how technology can be leveraged to reach global audiences, unlocking limitless potential to empower individuals and transform lives. Our conversation explored the importance of hiring talent, offering dignified roles and fair pay, and implementing flexible working practices to bridge the gender gap. We also delved into the power of mentorship, the value of investing in businesses that promote social solidarity, and how these efforts contribute to building a more just and equitable global ecosystem. Storytelling is at the heart of Olives and Heather. With boots on the ground, the team engages directly with people in Palestine, amplifying the real aspirations and priorities of these communities, crafting tailored solutions that address actual needs rather than imposing disconnected top-down strategies. One key takeaway Kathrine shared for employers: building the right team is just as critical as creating a successful product. Employees should never be treated as expendable, and it's essential to consider their needs, support their growth, and foster a workplace culture that celebrates individuality. Tune in to hear more about Kathrine's incredible insights and impactful work she's doing through Olives and Heather. Let's dive in.
So let's rewind pre-Palestine and talk to me a little bit about your experience in terms of your background, your academic background, and you say you haven't lived back home in Denmark since you were 19, and kind of the run up to the last 5 years and the kind of work you did and the experience that you got.
Yeah. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, and I cannot stress this enough. Like, I've never shown where I grew up to anyone without them being shocked and saying, okay, this is not what I expected, it's way worse. So it's really in the middle of nowhere. Nearest village is 400 people. And I moved from there to London, basically. So huge culture shock.
Massive shock.
And I'm the first person in my family to go to university. My family is, I would say, middle class, but I mean, most of my family never even went to high school. My mom was the first person to go to high school. So going to London was huge, both in terms of the cultural change, but also going to university, because I think until I was 15, I never even thought about what is university. Is that something for me? So I moved to London to study. Back then, I thought I was going to be a fashion designer, but then I was very appalled by the fashion industry as a whole. I think we all heard about the sweatshops and whatnot, but like really understanding the grainy details of not just international law, but the law that is in place in the countries where manufacturing is done and is not upheld, the impact it has on the environment, and even how people in Western countries are treated unless they get to a certain level within a company. I was very put off, and I think I always wanted to do something that was, let's call it business for good. So I sort of abandoned fashion and then moved into tech. So after London, I moved to Berlin, worked for a tech startup, and was like, "Ooh, tech is going to be how I'm going to change the world." So even though I don't have like a techie background, I'm not like, super gadgety or an engineer by any means. I just really liked how tech can empower people and change lives, and how unrestricted it feels. And I think that's also what led to the career path I'm on now, like in Palestine. Because for a short while, I was re-exploring my roots with the art and culture scene. But because it's so physical and tangible, it's much more impacted by, movement of people, movement of goods. And it's just harder to run a business and really create something scalable. And this is where tech is just brilliant. But yeah, I worked in London, Berlin, and Amsterdam in tech, always as a marketeer. And I think I just hit like a point around 2018 where I was like, okay, I really want to do something more meaningful. Like, I can look at my work and say it's not the worst kind of work out there, but it's also not really contributing to anything super meaningful. And I want to change that. And then after a trip to Palestine, I guess you can see I saw the light. I felt like this is the way that I can maybe make a difference. I thought about it for a long time. I maybe spent 6 months just exploring what are the options before I started volunteering with some civil society organizations. And I was doing that remotely for 6 months before they were like, hey, wouldn't you like to actually move to Palestine and stay there for 3 to 6 months? And I thought, why not? I never had a proper gap year and this would be great. Unfortunately, I chose to do that before COVID. So I was basically sent back home and felt like I did not get to do everything I wanted to do in Palestine. And then from there, I got a job with Gaza Sky Geeks. I returned, lived in Gaza for a period of time. And I think the one thing I'm realizing is no matter how much energy you pour into Palestine, you'll never feel like it's enough. So yeah, 5 years later, I'm still here. So
it's really interesting that you went into a creative industry and you saw beyond the surface and actually realized that it's, you know, all the glitz and glamour and everything that we put on actually beneath the surface. Everything and everyone involved in the process are not treated in a way that is humane. And I feel like that's probably stayed in the back of your mind. And I almost feel like you were building up towards being where you are today. And you're able to take those skills and the knowledge and the experience that you've got and go back to what actually triggered you to make the move in the first place and led you to go to Palestine. I want to focus on the last thing you just said now, which I think is really interesting. You feel that no matter how much you pour in, it's never enough. And I guess we could turn that on its head and say, it's never enough because there's so much potential, and you've created a platform to help them launch that and put it out there. So I guess my next question for you is can you tell us a little bit about the story behind the development of your flagship product? Was there a sort of an aha moment that made you realize this could be the solution to the world's needs or to Palestine's needs, but beyond that? Because I do feel that, you know, working and doing what you do within Palestine has got a global impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a model that you could replicate in any other country. And I think the reason why I think it's so needed in Palestine, it's sort of like twofold. On one side, it's the lack of opportunity and the lack of dignified jobs for Palestinians. And on the other side, to prove the world wrong, because people have this totally obscure idea that Palestinians live in caves and tents and they don't have internet and whatever negative stereotype you want to slap on there. And I'm always so baffled by that. I'm I guess, a highly logical person. So I never imagined that. When I came here, I thought, yeah, they'll be like me. Like, yeah, aesthetically, things will look different. But we know that even in, you know, the outback of Australia, where people take days to get somewhere, they still have internet. So like, why wouldn't they have internet? So coming here, I wouldn't say I was surprised by that. Like everything was sort of what I expected. It was more, let's say, society and culture and stuff that was different, but work life was not that different. But working with NGOs, I realized that even donors, like people that are in this space all the time, would be shocked to hear that the literacy rate in Palestine is almost 100%. They say it's 98. Almost everyone has access to internet in some shape or form. It's the highest educated youth in the Middle East. There's so many factors and variables there to consider in terms of just how qualified Palestinians are. And still people think of it as a charity case, like, oh, if I was to hire a Palestinian, like I'm doing good. And with Olives and Heather, I really wanted to show that, you know, you can do good, yes, but it's also an investment in your company. Like you will get good work and you will get results. And it's not a sacrifice that, you know, for your business to make a difference, you have to, you know, skimp on certain aspects. Like we can deliver in that regard. So that's kind of like where we're at now. But I would say the journey sort of started with me feeling it would be hard for me to continue doing the kind of work I did at Gaza Sky Geeks for another local organization, just because it requires a certain size and structure. So I thought, okay, let me take a chance here and do this on a consulting basis and then see what am I able to do in that regard. Like maybe I can work with a number of different organizations. And my goal really was to help the digital economy work on storytelling, and create jobs. And I knew that those are the three ways I can make a difference, but I wasn't really sure at the time, like out of those three levers, which is going to be the one that I pull harder. And over the years, I realized, well, people don't just want the marketing strategy, they want help executing as well. And that just made it clear to me, well, there's actually potential that the job creation isn't just through the people I work with. I can also create jobs with Olives and Heather and hire, young, creative Palestinians that want to really, prove themselves in certain areas. The unemployment rate here is crazy. Before the war, it was around 50% youth unemployment in the West Bank and between 50 and 70 in Gaza. So you're lucky just to get a job. And when you're in that job, you're not exactly in a position to challenge your manager or push for change or really expect this crazy sort of career growth that you would expect if you're in London. Like you just job hop until you get to where you want to be, right? That's not an option here. And the alternative is, well, either you can try to get a remote job, which is very difficult, especially if you're Palestinian. People have all sorts of concerns about wire transfers going to Palestine and anything you can imagine. And on top of that, let's say the final resort would be you'd have to leave. And not everyone's cut out for the expat life. And I also don't think it's a fair choice to say that if you want a meaningful job, you have to leave your family and your loved ones, and especially in a situation like Palestine where the land means so much and people are so hesitant about leaving. So even though, the team is currently 10 people, and of course, there's loads more people out there, for me, that's a big driver, knowing that like I can help bring job opportunities to these people that they wouldn't be able to necessarily get on their own, and then not forced to leave, because really the majority of the people I work with, they don't want to leave. They want to stay here. They want to invest in Palestine.
I think this is it's a wonderful example of why businesses should be thinking about diversity, because they're not only just going to get hardworking people. We always hear stories. People are always inspired by stories. Biggest podcasters out there and CEOs out there that you talk to have got stories of hardship. You've got an entire population that have only known that for 4 generations, and yet despite that, they still battle through. They still aim to be the best versions of themselves. And so when you invest in that as a business, you're getting all the work ethic and ethos and values that you would look for from an employee. So I think that's a really good point I wanted to highlight. And I kind of want to touch on the other roadblock, which is it must be frustrating to know that you go out there and you're putting all this effort into yourself and your business and your ideas, and you're obviously highly employable, but then, as you say, there's it doesn't necessarily equal, and this is something we take for granted in the West. You go, you get educated, you go through all the training courses, you get yourself ready, and then that eventually, even if you're looking for 6 months, a year, eventually you're going to land that job, and as you say, you're going to work your way through it. So this is a challenge that I kind of want to home in on. So you work closely with them to help them see opportunities and avoid the brain drain. I think that's really important. And a brain drains happen in all countries. It's not within Palestine, but it's keeping that talent within Palestine and helping it grow. So tell me a little bit about some initiatives that you've worked on, 1 or 2 examples where you can take us through that journey and the success stories behind them.
Well, I think there's several components there to address. Like, first of all, it's the imbalance between men and women when it comes to getting opportunities in, let's say, the field of marketing. You will find a lot of women that will do very entry-level sort of social media copywriting type jobs, but often they're not necessarily in a position to get the let's say, more challenging jobs. And for many women, there's just so many responsibilities to balance outside of just like taking care of yourself in terms of duties towards your family. Maybe you have children, maybe there's a household, like there's different things that require a certain level of flexibility. And when you then factor in the roadblocks that I mentioned before. It means it's very hard for you to go out and actually get a job and make all of that work out. So by creating a remote first company, which Olives and Heather is, like, we're in Palestine, but every one of our team members can work from home. So that means even our team members based in Gaza are still able to work. So by creating that kind of setup, we are creating more opportunities for people that would normally not have such an easy time getting a job. And if we look at women specifically, there's this huge pool of talent with women that have studied English lit or something else that's more, let's say, artistic or like the softer side of business at university, that just don't have any opportunities because there's just not enough work here. They are the kind of people that we can work with. So Olives and Heather we don't have like it's an all women's company sort of mantra. I hire people based on their qualifications, but it just happens to be that the majority of the team members are women. And, I'm very happy with that because it's on merit, exactly. But people comment on it a lot and they think it's a decision that I've made that like, I only hire women, but everyone in the team has earned their badge. They're very good at what they do. And I'm so proud to show that to the outside world as well. In terms of what I do to help them, we always work on projects in teams, and I work a lot both on the hard skills, but also the soft skills. The company culture, it's not just like a Middle East versus Europe thing, but there's definitely a difference. And because I've always worked in tech, I have a very progressive view on what a healthy work environment is. And I try to instill that in the team and how we work on projects, provide feedback, deal with workflows, and just really go about this in a way that's highly unusual, to say the least, for the local community. And it's part of the reason why the team loves working with me, because I definitely sense that there's a sense of loyalty and commitment across the board. And then even when it comes to hard skills, I'm doing my best to provide resources for the team, whether it's events and webinars or podcasts or different resources they can engage with in their own time to help grow and keep developing themselves. But I'm also pairing them up with mentors. So it's been a little bit sporadic in the past, but now I'm trying to be more structured about it. But I really think everyone could benefit from working with somebody who's in the same field as them, who's a few years ahead of them, who can really help provide that sort of seniority and expertise and help them grow. Because I think when you're a junior, you experience a lot of growth within your first 2 years. But after that, when you sort of hit that mid-level point, like, how do you keep growing? How do you keep improving? Especially if you're in an environment where nobody's operating at that level, you would have to leave Palestine in order to be a senior SEO specialist, for example. But by providing that connection to super talented people that work around the world and like creating those mentoring setups, that's another way that I can help the team keep growing and keep improving. And, part of me is like, oh, I really want them to be the best that they can be. But I also, I have to acknowledge that it's an added value now as they're in the team, but I'm also essentially building people that will be able to leave Olives and Heather and succeed and do far better, in their career after Olives and Heather. So it's bigger than me. It's bigger than the company, bigger than investing in the company. It's really about, helping people grow as much as they can.
The work that you do touches on marketing, PR, branding, the whole package. And I think you're unique in where you are located geographically and the kind of projects that you support. Is there one or two examples that you can give us of the projects that you worked on that you're really proud of? And can you kind of tell us a little bit about the challenges, how you were able to overcome them, and where they are now in their journey?
Oh, that's really hard. I always feel quite invested in all the projects, like I get very excited about the challenge that people are trying to solve. The first one that pops into my head is the impact report we did for Gaza Sky Geeks last year. And part of the reason why I'm very proud of that is because at the time, there wasn't much information coming out about the impacts of the situation in Gaza, like what is actually happening on the ground. Of course, we don't have, journalistic access, and you're very dependent on the voices on the ground to really provide you with any information. And the only reports I was seeing was by the World Bank and all these big organizations that would make everything very focused on numbers and quantities, and it felt very inhuman. And what we were trying to do was essentially collect data from the people on the ground, which at the time was so challenging. This was when the power outs and internet connectivity was a huge issue. And we still managed to conduct interviews with over 20 people in Palestine, like business owners, freelancers, and whatnot. And some people would walk 2 kilometers back and forth 3 times to complete the interview because they were that committed to telling the story. So it took a huge toll on the team, like emotionally, to conduct these interviews. It was truly eye-opening to see what results came out of it. And it felt very meaningful to be able to produce this report where we still include the numbers, we still include the reality, but we shine a light on real people, and it's their voices that shine through. And it's not this global development community saying X, Y, and Z needs to happen in Gaza once all this stops. It was people's own wishes. It was what they said, this is what we need, and this is the priority it should be in. So it felt very meaningful, both the way the project was done and the outcome that we produced, and to be able to put it in a very different style layout, the report that we ended up producing also felt really good, because often when you see these reports, it's a bunch of text and graphs and nothing else, and you're not very enticed to actually read it. But this was designed to be for, in a large sense, business people, but really like everyday folk that would want to read this. And the result was also that it was picked up by media, and it became a thing that people were referencing and actually had an interest in. So on so many fronts, both from like a value point of view, from a organizational point of view, from an impact point of view, it made a big difference. And I feel very proud of that project. Trying to think of other ones.
It's hard, isn't it? It's being asked to pick your favorite child.
Yeah.
You can't decide.
Yeah.
I want to touch on what you've said, because funnily, I was talking to someone yesterday. I'm not going to name a specific organization who've withdrawn funding from the region. And they were saying, well, it is going to be difficult for the however many thousands of people who are employed by this organization, because they're going to lose their jobs and they're going to wonder where the next paycheck is going to come from. But the problem is that they, with all the best will in the world, they were massively disconnected from the people who they were trying to help. And she said, for example, they spent so much money and time on this local social impact initiative. They all turned up to this particular region where I am at the moment, and it was to teach old ladies how to fry an egg. And then it just reminded me of the saying in the UK, teaching grandma how to suck eggs. And it was just, the irony was not lost on me. And I thought, are you absolutely crazy? This is, you should be on the ground talking to them. And it's not, and I want to touch on something else you say. It's not about, the Middle East, Palestine versus Europe. This is, when we talk about ESG, it's global. And yes, cultural differences are there, but we have to accept and tolerate and celebrate these differences. Is the only way forward, and we acknowledge them, and then we take the best of what each culture has to bring to the table. And so, yeah, you kind of, it's recognizing that, but it's also recognizing that if you're going to help someone, you need to go and listen to them. And people feel even more, again, it's not questioning intention, but people feel even more disconnected and frustrated if their situation is seen as a statistics and he's just publishing graphs and data.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a big topic. I think anyone in the development sector will know that there's a lot of discourse and conversation around like what's the right way to develop projects, and there's definitely calling it an issue is maybe an understatement, but there's definitely a gap when it comes to what are people asking for versus what are you willing to invest in. And I think Palestinians and Gazans specifically, they're not just asking, they're already doing. Like, while the bombs were still dropping, an organization like Hope Hub had already started creating co-working spaces that people could go to and work from despite of everything. And that's the kind of thing that you need to invest in, instead of coming and thinking, no, I can do a better co-working space, or I think you need this other thing. Like, no, people are already telling you this is what we need. Like, support that's where we need to go. Yeah, in terms of other projects, I'm still like, the thing is, I always pick the Palestine ones first, and I feel like that's maybe not the most diverse choice, but I would say.
But do you know what? Actually, let's talk a little bit about outside of Palestine, because I mean, it's two things that I'm really interested in. How has your project been received by the world outside of Palestine? And where do you see that your vision? Because I think, for me, having listened to what you've said, it's an inspiration to anyone looking to do what you're doing outside of Palestine. I think the issues that you tackle are not limited to Palestine.
Well, before 7th of October, we were talking about we need to start expanding outside, because the Palestinian market can only really offer that much work. And if my ambition is to create a lot of marketing jobs, we need more work. So the talk was there, but very little was being done to actually make that happen. And but let's say the situation just accelerated that whole process, because I went from having a pretty healthy pipeline and 2 people working with me, and actually wondering like, oh, are we going to be able to keep up this workload? And then 7th of October rolled around and we lost every single client, and our whole pipeline just became worthless, because everyone was somehow linked to Palestine and donor funding. And even if it was a more commercial project, people still felt it wasn't right to be, investing in marketing during times like this. So I was sort of faced with, if you don't get new business within 2 months, you are realistically going to just have to pack up and leave and figure out what's next in your life. So that was a huge challenge, because I would argue that until spring last year, just naming Palestine in a business context almost immediately got you labeled as a terrorist, to be quite frank. And it was really hard, because I did not emotionally feel like I was in a position to be doing business development in such an aggressive way, but I didn't have a choice, because it was either doing that or giving up. And I certainly didn't want to give up. And I just had to accept that a lot of people I spoke to would say, we're interested, but we're just concerned about Palestine. Or they would tell me, we love what you do, but we don't have any work for you. And in some cases, we actually also had people that said, we love your story, but we see you as a charity case and we actually don't want to pay you fairly for your work. So that also did not lead to business. But as things went on, we definitely started getting more work and more people that, believed in us and thought, saw the value in what we can offer. And over time, I would say we're in a place now where maybe 50% of our work is business outside Palestine, but a big chunk of that is still somehow linked to solidarity. Yeah. But we do have clients that in theory have nothing to do with Palestine. Like, there's this AI company in Norway where it's just the founder saw some of my stories on LinkedIn and was triggered by that. But like, his work has nothing to do with Palestine whatsoever. And he's very happy to be working with us and see the value in the work that we do. And I do believe that that's where we need to go. Like, obviously, I prefer to just keep working on all these different Palestine initiatives, but I also have to be realistic about, do I want to be selfish and have a portfolio of only this and then limit the potential overall impact I could create? Or do I want to go all out and, get as many clients as I can get, and really try to create these job opportunities. And it's also about the kind of job opportunities, right? Because if we're talking these sort of advocacy projects in Palestine, we're talking a lot of comms, branding, social media type content. But if I want to really push my SEO specialist or my UI and UX designer, even like say the motion graphics designer, then I need to get more and bigger business and really think outside the box and be like, well, you might choose us for ESG reasons, but it maybe becomes more of a box to tick than the fact that you're particularly invested in Palestine. And that's okay. Like for me, at the end of the day, if I don't have any major objections to the kind of work that you do or the sort of business that you're running, I'd be happy to work with you. I would say there are still, there are some hard lines that we follow in terms of, like, I prefer not to work with a fossil fuel company, for example. There's also considerations in terms of, let's say, the BDS movement and whatnot, like who do we want to work with? Of course, I have to think about what my team members are comfortable with and not comfortable with. But at the end of the day, like, we're definitely going to have to look at more traditionally commercial companies if we want to keep growing. And I'm okay with that. Honestly, it's been part of a long journey of evaluating, like, is that the direction we want to go in? Because I've been given two pieces of advice and they're totally opposite. One is lean 100% into the Palestine narrative and only take business related to that. The other one has been, don't tell anyone that it's a Palestinian company. Just show your face and present it as something Western, and people don't need to know that there's a team behind you that's based in Palestine, and that would be the best way. And I'm just a little bit, taken aback, thinking, no, I think I can do both. I want to be able to do both, because that's also part of challenging that global narrative around Palestine, to say that it's not like a pro or against. Like, there's real people on the ground that have potential, that can, they don't just need opportunities, but they can help your business. And that's, let's say, the path that we're currently on. And I'm still figuring it out as we go. But I would definitely say the conversation has gotten easier. There's companies now that are responsive and more open to partnering with us or working with us that a year ago they would not even give me a second of their time. And if anything, I think every rejection and every actually, rejection is not the worst. Not being answered is the worst. So I would say every silence is just motivating me to push harder, especially because you get to a point where you see the people that were not supporting you or didn't believe in you actually coming around and going, oh, I'm so impressed with what you're doing, and maybe we'd like to be part of that. And that's where I want to go. Like, whether you see it now or not, I see it, and I'm going to go there one way or another, and I'll find the people that will make that happen.
I'm hearing a story of faith and resilience and really staying true to your cause and your beliefs. And that sounds like that's been enough for you to push through the hardest times and come out at the end knowing that actually not everyone's going to like you. You're not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but you don't need to be, because those who are aligned with your ethics and with your visions will invest in you. And for what it's worth, I think the two pieces of advice, if you've been given, are as extreme as each other. And the happy medium is to actually just think, no, I am proud of where it started and how it started and why it's there. And that's always going to sit behind my brand. And we don't need to, it doesn't mean that it's limited to Palestine, because ESG is a global challenge and it's a global opportunity. And so everyone's got a story behind them. Everyone's got stories to why they do what they do and what motivates them. And that doesn't mean that you're limited to the place where that grew out from. You can take everything that you've learned and you can share it globally and make it a success for everyone. And you've made me want to grow my brand through you. I'm still very much in the infancy of this project, and I don't know where it's going to go. But you know, I want to have people sitting behind that brand that will help it grow, who share the same values. And I want to feel like I'm with people who are really amazing at what they do. And I want to feel that the outcome of whatever I'm doing circles back.
Yeah. No, I get that. And I feel that way about the team. Like every day I tell my husband, like, I'm so proud of this person and this person's doing such a good job. And I think about it in everything I do, because if, for example, my graphic designer was to say, I'm leaving you, I would have a big problem, because she's really talented and it took me a long time to find her. And it's the same across the board. Like I've put a lot of effort into the recruitment, and I have really, really great people that are standing with me, and they're being so supportive, and it would not be the same without them. Yeah, and that's the great part of the job, I think, because I mean, anyone who's worked as a service provider will know there's enough challenges to go around, but the team, that should not be one of the problems.
My final question, and this is the knowledge share.
Yeah.
A key piece of knowledge or valuable principles or framework that's been especially important in your journey, something that you believe would be helpful for other founders in the impact space that you're willing to share with the audience. I know there's probably more than one thing, but if you could just pick one thing to founders in the impact space, what would it be?
I see a lot of founders, whether it's impact or any other business, that will focus so heavily on the product building components and not on how are you actually going to market and sell this product, even though that is equal, in my opinion, to building the product itself. And if they don't have any experience in that regard, very often I see them wanting to hire a junior person to come in and just, take care of that, totally underestimating how important that function is. And it's not just about them succeeding in their venture, it's also about the team members. And I don't think it's a fair experience to create for your team members, whether we're talking interns, juniors, whatever. And I feel people look at staff members almost as disposable. And I think you have to take a long, hard look at yourself and say, am I ready to take on a hire? Do I have the time available in the day to train that person and be available and really support them? And think about that as a responsibility, almost like a paternal responsibility. And I don't see us moving forward in terms of ESG if we don't start taking that responsibility seriously, not just in terms of let's say solopreneurs, small founding teams and whatnot, but on a big scale as well. Do you have the infrastructure in place to actually honor your commitments to your people, to make sure that this is a healthy work environment? And it's not even about are people happy to go to work or not, but it's what kind of energy are you putting out there in general? What kind of company are you building? What kind of solutions will you ultimately build if you don't take care of your people? And for me, that's super important. It's always been a big part of my career. Every job I've been in, there's been a huge focus on people culture. It's something I'm trying to bring to Olives and Heather. And there's so many frameworks out there and ways that you can go about it. But ultimately, I feel like you have to just look at the individual and understand what this person is about and try to put them in the best possible role to succeed, and not be so square about it and be I want 1, 2, 3. Give that person room to excel in the things that they can actually bring value in those certain areas, or believe in people. It's maybe a bit fluffy and vague, but I think it's just one of those things that is on my mind a lot. And I see that mistake happening again and again. We box people into a certain role, certain function, and we don't want them to think outside the box. But it's not it doesn't matter who you hire for that role. It will never be proper diversity if you've already decided this is what that person is going to do and contribute with. And this is the limitations of the investments I will make into that person. So I guess, yeah, the advice is look at people and invest in people, and don't just
Yes.
see it as a disposable resource.
It's about emotional intelligence, isn't it? And neurodiversity. There's a massive movement now around neurodiversity, and I think this is really important because actually it's starting to force people to recognize that we're not one-dimensional. It's such an obvious thing. People's personalities shape how they work, and we need to understand, and we need to make space for that. So thank you for sharing that. I was not expecting that one at all. I think when we talk about ESG, people focus so much on the E and the S, and when it comes to the G, but your recruitment strategy and everybody else that shapes it is going to make or break it. So thank you for sharing that. It's been really useful, and thank you also for agreeing to come on and give me your valuable time for this webcast. And I'm just really grateful. I want to put your message out there. I hope everyone who watches this will look at the amazing work that you're doing, and will reach out and see how you can help them with their businesses. I certainly want that for Impact Soft in the future.
That's really good to hear.
And yeah, look forward to collaborating with you.
Likewise.
Thank you
and thank
so
you
much,
for having
Kathrine.
me.